Shara, Robert Harding, Justin Ritzel. This is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. Super Bowl week. Oh boy. We've been waiting all year for this. I forgot. I think my prediction was Green Bay, Kansas City. I can't remember what it was now. It seems like such a long time ago, but here we are. It is Super Bowl week, and we're going to do our picks, talk a little bit about the game, maybe have a special guest later. We'll see how that goes, but we'll get right to it. So the conference championships, Robert got both games right. Props to him. Justin was 1-1, and I was 0-2. So
made some money off those picks too, by the way.
That's good. I didn't, obviously. So the Super Bowl is the Rams right now, as I saw on FanDuel. Rams are a 4-point favorite versus the Bengals, and the total is 48.5. So, we've all been reading about this game, and we've been watching videos and different things about this game and everything, and how we think it might go and everything. So the way I feel is I think the Rams defense is going to be the determining factor in this game. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Von Miller. I mean, the on paper, the Rams have the best defense left. Okay. I mean, they're better than the Bengals defense. So I think they get to Joe Burrow. I think they stop the run game. And I think everybody thinks this is going to be a really high-scoring game and everything. And I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think that if you're going to bet the total of 48.5, I'm going with the under on it. And, hey, we have a cat. I love it. So I think the Rams' defense is the key. Look, the Bengals are going to score some points. They're going to get shut out or anything like that, but they'll get a couple touchdowns at least. The Rams offense with Matthew Stafford and Odell Beckham Jr. and Cooper Kupp, I think these guys can score some points. The Bengals defense does not scare me. It's a solid defense. I mean, look what they did against the Chiefs in the second half and in overtime last week. They obviously can play very well when the time arises. I really think that the Rams are the better team. It's their year. The Bengals, they're going to be good for years to come. And the Bengals can win this game. Look, I mean, you get to the Super Bowl, you can obviously win it. But I think the Rams are the better team. And I think the home field means a little something too. Not a lot, but a little something. So I like the Rams to win 27-17. That's my Super Bowl pick.
A score too.
Wow. Go ahead, Robert. Who do you like?
Well, I think, first of all, I think this is a great matchup. I mean, it's, as a Bills fan, it's not the matchup I wanted, but I like this game. I like that it's not the Chiefs or the Patriots or, one of these teams that seems to be in the conversation every year. The Bengals, certainly got here with a lot of young players, a good young group led by Joe Burrow that, got them to this point. And on the Rams side, they've made the decision that we're going to build the best team possible, even if that means giving up some draft picks. So they go out and get Matthew Stafford, and that I think has made the difference this year, and the reason why they got back to the Super Bowl, and here they are with a legitimate shot at winning the whole thing, just a year out from getting Stafford. It's crazy. I think that this will be a good game. It's an interesting matchup, though, because these teams, I think, in a lot of ways are similar. The Rams defense, obviously, they have a great front. They got Jalen Ramsey on the back end. But don't sleep on the Bengals defense, especially after what they showed us against the Chiefs a couple weeks ago. That, and Mahomes is certainly a more mobile quarterback than Stafford is. And they created problems for Mahomes, certainly with how they covered his top receivers, but also how they got after him, that they made him move around a little bit more. And, they prevented some of those big runs that the Bills gave up a week before. So, I think that all things considered here, I'm going with the Bengals. I just like what they have been doing in the playoffs. It seems like they, you look at what they've done in the 3 playoff games so far, it hasn't been the prettiest football. they're not lighting up the scoreboard or anything like that. It's situational. They've shown up in the situations and either made a play on offense or made a play on defense. And that's been the difference in the game. You go back to the game against the Titans. We were talking about this before we went live, Chris, the interception of Tannehill that wins them that game. Who knows how that game ends up if they don't get that takeaway? How they played against the Chiefs is huge. So I'm riding with the Bengals, and we actually have Bob Sosi joining us right now.
Oh, good.
So I'll get him in here.
There he is.
Oh, there we
Hi,
go.
Bob.
Guys. How are you?
Good. Good. Thanks. Good to see you.
You too. You too. Likewise.
We are live right now. For those of you that don't know, Bob Sosi is the play-by-play announcer for the New England Patriots, and we are very fortunate to have him join us for our Super Bowl preview program. And of course, Bob is an Auburn native, Auburn High School, class of '85. Always have to drop that in. So,
Get to show our age, Chris.
I know we're getting old. What can we do? But hey, we're aging gracefully. Bob, again, thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it. We're doing our Super Bowl picks, and you're more than welcome to throw yours in too. And then after that, we have some questions for you. So, Robert, you were discussing your Super Bowl pick of the Bengals.
Yeah, I'll just finish up. I think that the Bengals will take care of business. I think it's going to come down to, again, making a play in a critical situation, and that'll be the difference in the game. I think it'll be a close one, but if it comes down to needing a field goal, we know the Bengals have a kicker to do that. Evan McPherson, that kid's got a leg, Justin Tucker-esque, and I think they'll win it on Sunday.
All right, Justin, go ahead. Who do you like in the game?
Well, I think this is going to be a lower scoring game too. That just seems to be the way of how these Super Bowls tend to go, even with the high scoring offenses, is that the teams kind of take a quarter to feel themselves out. I think Bob can probably speak to this. Some of these Patriots Super Bowls that ended up being high scoring, even they kind of started out slow in the first quarter, only 3 points, maybe it's scoreless. So I kind of see that playing out this way. I love the under. And honestly, I like the Rams. I don't want to say it feels like this is their year. They were a number 4 seed. It's not like they dominated the NFC all season. They've had some close games in the playoffs, obviously winning by a couple field goals the last couple rounds. But I look at the matchup of their defensive line versus the Bengals offensive line, and as cool as Joe Burrow is under pressure, and him not being afraid to take hits, I just think that limits your explosiveness on offense when your quarterback's just getting knocked around all day. And I got to think at some point it's going to come back to bite Cincinnati. So I like the Rams. I think it'll be a close game. I think the Bengals will cover. I think the Rams will win. I'm looking at maybe a 23-20 type game.
Okay. Bob, do you want to give us a Super Bowl prediction?
Well, I'll follow up, first of all, with a thank you for having me on today. Really appreciate being with you guys once again, and follow up Justin's point. Bill Belichick has often said, and you hear Tom Brady echo this as well on various documentaries, other Patriots players who've been in Super Bowls, that a Super Bowl is really 2 games. It's like playing 2 games. And I think you often see that, to Justin's point, where the first half is drastically different than the second half. And the best illustration of Patriot games was the Super Bowl against the Carolina Panthers, Super Bowl 38, when it was a kind of a defensive slugfest or slop fest offensively in the first half. And then both teams really got into a shootout in the second half. And I think the other part of that is, in Super Bowl play, I do think there is a feeling out period. I don't necessarily think it's nervousness, but I think the teams are so well prepared. I think teams are so conscious of not making mistakes offensively. And sometimes you'll see irrational mistakes early on, interestingly enough. But I do think there is kind of like that boxer mentality in an early round of a heavyweight championship fight, where they're kind of feeling one another out early in the game. I like what Justin said as well. I think the key matchup here is the defensive line of the Rams versus the Bengals offensive line and the ability to get pressure on Burrow. And in concert with that too, it's what the Rams can do possibly that, the Kansas City couldn't do. And that's maybe line up Jalen Ramsey on Jamar Chase or T Higgins and take one of those guys away from Joe Burrow. And so I think that's the key. I think for the Rams, the key is if their defensive line dominates the game, they win. On the flip side of that, though, I think Matthew Stafford has been prone to make some mistakes. And even in their victories of late, there's been a critical error here or there that he's been able to overcome. And for Cincinnati, you got to take Cooper Kupp away. Obviously, they're critical situations against the Rams, but I think that that's a lot easier said than done. I just think that the Rams are playing at a really high level in the playoffs for the most part. They've shown they can come back as they did against San Fran. I thought they had to bounce back against Tampa Bay after blowing that big lead. And so my head says LA in this game. My heart is with Cincinnati. A good friend of mine is the voice of the Bengals. He's from Jamestown. So he's got strong Central New York ties, former voice of the Syracuse Chiefs. Dan Hort, of course, used to be at WTVH Channel 5. However,
Yep.
JB Long, the voice of the Rams, he and his family have spent a lot of time in Skinny Atlas through the years. So there are some local connections. Dan's a little bit more stronger and I think greater history to Central New York. But nonetheless, for my two colleagues calling the game this weekend for the respective teams, both have some ties to Central New York.
And Dan Hort actually had his name dropped on a Simpsons episode back in the 90s.
The character, Ken Levine, was one of the writers of The Simpsons, good friend of Dan Hort. So Dan's got he's a cult-like figure. He's got a shirt now in Cincinnati with his signature call on the Bengals win. They're in the Super Bowl. He called a college playoff for the University of Cincinnati. And the best of all, as my kids have discovered, he's been on the Simpsons episode.
Bob, while we have you here, there's a couple things we want to discuss with you. The first thing is, you've broadcast, I believe, 3 or 4 Super Bowls?
4, yeah.
4. And, as a broadcaster, what is the Super Bowl experience like for you?
Well, the first time I went in Super Bowl 49, I was pulled aside by a national producer from Westwood One, and he told me, look, enjoy every second of this because you may not get back here again. And number 2, it will, make you feel less nervous. And I try to do that. I just enjoy all of it. I mean, the things about the Super Bowl from a broadcasting standpoint that are different are the things that are unrelated to the actual game on the field. It's the longer than usual wait. You have to get to the stadium earlier than you otherwise would. And we generally get to the stadium at least 3, 4, 5 hours before kickoff in the regular season. But you want to be there earlier because of security and just the number of media people that are entering the stadium at roughly the same time. And then it's the long breaks, of course, not just during the commercial breaks, but especially at halftime, where if there's any sense of rhythm, you have to kind of recapture that at the start of the second half. At times it's been a good thing that there was a long break during the halftime intermission. But overall, once the game starts, I hate to say as if I were a coach or a player offering up a cliche, but it really is. If you're doing it right, at least trying to and focusing on the game, it's no different than calling any other game, with one exception, I guess, in that in the back of your mind that if you screw up, and I have, then it's going to be captured for immortality because the people are going to be hearing the radio calls from the Super Bowl, in perpetuity, I guess, as long as NFL Films is around. So,
well, of course, the opposite of that is if you make a memorable call, it lives forever, and you've had that. I remember the Malcolm Butler interception a few years ago, and obviously the great comeback from 28-3. I mean, you've had some great calls and things that when Patriot fans get together years after we're gone, they're going to be playing those clips. So that's got to be pretty special to know that your calls are literally going to be immortal.
It's humbling. You have to not think about that. Try not to think about it, even though you do. I think at times. I think the big thing is not to try to be contrived and script anything that you're going to say in the moment. When the championship, if you're lucky enough to call a title, does become official. The thing about the Butler play, I cringe now when I hear it because I think I should have just shut up immediately after I said the ball was intercepted by Malcolm Butler. But for a lot of people, it's impactful because I was so excited, and my emotion and my partner's emotion, maybe more so, reflected theirs in the moment. So I think Patriot fans in particular really appreciate that. I go back and think about that play. I didn't know for sure that Butler had it. I called it. It was such a quick developing play. The ball was in Wilson's hand on the snapback, and then he let it go. It was a quick throw and into a crowd from my vantage point. And afterwards, I kept saying to our producers, we were going down toward the field after the game, did I get it right? Did I say Malcolm Butler? And he said, Bob, shut up, just enjoy it. You got it right. But I think, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of at-bats in big moments because of the Patriots' success. And, I know the guys we're going to call it this weekend are going to have their moments too. But the biggest thing I think in any broadcast is you don't want to screw it up. And before the Butler interception, the other side note to that is I did screw it up because, like a lot of people, I thought that the pass to Jermaine Kearse down the right sideline was incomplete when Butler, ironically, knocked the ball in the air. And eventually, after the ball was battered around a bit by Kearse with Deron Harmon leaping over him, he made the catch. So I was still beating myself up when Butler picked off the pass from Wilson because I had screwed up the play in my mind 2 plays earlier.
Bob, I have like a nuts and bolts question for you. When you call a game, obviously every stadium is different, and obviously the Super Bowl is a lot different because of the number of media. But when you call a game, do you use binoculars to look at certain things? Do you just use your eyes, just looking at the field and the distance away and everything? And how do when you call a game, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, Chris. I do utilize binoculars quite a bit, and that started really during my Navy football broadcasting days where it was a necessity because of the triple option offense. When the quarterback fakes the handoff or gives the handoff to the fullback, that mesh, I found it a necessity to have binoculars, on that particular part of the play because, so often if you called it with the naked eye and even using binoculars, you could be easily fooled. And I just, have this knack of trying to focus on the formation, who's out there, when the ball is snapped, keeping the binoculars on the football. But then, once I know, like after the quarterback comes off play action, maybe I'll pull the binoculars back and use my naked eye to see the whole field. Sometimes I'll keep the binoculars out there, and I don't know when my hands dropped out. It just happens. It's kind of something that's done subconsciously. One of the things to your point about the Super Bowls, your question about the Super Bowls, that is different as well, is the vantage point in a lot of the new stadiums, which of course now host the Super Bowl. In Gillette Stadium, we have a fabulous vantage point, best in the league, I think, in terms of proximity to the 50-yard line. And there are some other stadiums as well where you have a great view of the action from the radio booth, even as a visitor. Baltimore comes to mind first and foremost. But with a lot of the new stadiums, because that area between the 20s is prime real estate for A, network television. They've got to make sure that the network TV booth is at the 50, but B, and not close behind, not far behind, I should say, luxury suites. So the radio booths, including the home booths in many of the new stadiums, are being bumped down toward the corners of the field, or toward the corners of the end zone. And often you're watching the field go away from you. And that makes it a little more challenging to call plays at times in terms of judging what yard line a ball carrier is at, or where is the ball in relation to the first down marker. So there it's kind of a combination of where you're calling it with your naked eye and try to set things up, but also maybe taking a peek at the television monitor, or in a lot of these new stadiums like SoFi in LA, looking at the enormous video board in front of you that's hanging down basically from the roof, between you and the field. And you can take a look, okay, what's the down distance on that? Where are they relative to the first down marker? So that's a difference as well.
Yeah. Well, Robert, Justin, go ahead. If you got any questions for Bob, fire away.
Yeah, Bob, I did want to get your thoughts on Tom Brady's retirement. Obviously, you called many games at the tail end of his time with the Patriots, and certainly we saw what he did with the Bucs the last 2 seasons. But what thoughts come to your mind when you look back on his career, especially the time that you had really a front row seat to watching who many consider to be the GOAT in the NFL?
Well, I'm one of those people who do consider that, Robert, and I guess we'll consider him retired for now, even though after the initial report there were denials, there was the unretirement, and then there was the official retirement statement, and now there's the interview with Jim Gray within the last 48 hours or so, where he says never say never. So, we'll we'll consider him retired for the moment. The biggest things that stand out to me, really, obviously there are the great moments when they come from behind victories, and I got a chance to get a taste of it my very first regular season broadcast for the Patriots in Buffalo. They were down by 4 in the fourth quarter. EJ Manuel's debut for the Bills. Interestingly, as a rookie, the Patriots are down 4 in 2013. Brady leads them downfield for a field goal, and another one with 5 seconds left to win it. And that particular team had a disappointing season by today's Patriots standards. The Pats were kind of stuck on 3 Super Bowl wins, and the 2013 team ended up being shorthanded in the end and got beat by Denver. But they had the succession of remarkable comebacks. It was the Buffalo game to start, and then a month later they beat New Orleans on a last-second pass to Kenbrell Tompkins, an undrafted free agent. And then they were down 24-0 in November and came back and beat the Broncos on Sunday Night Football in overtime. There were a couple of other games in like the next 2 weeks, wins over Houston and Cleveland that followed the same kind of script, improbable fourth quarter comebacks for them to win. And so that was a taste of Brady at his best in the regular season. Then, of course, as Chris alluded to, I had a chance to call him in 3 Super Bowls, including the 2 greatest comebacks in Super Bowl history, first against the Seahawks in 49 and then surpassing it against the Falcons in Super Bowl 51. But the things that stand out to me, and I wrote about this for our station's website, I was asked by our program director to share some thoughts. And it's also on my blog as well, my personal blog. I just posted it there last night. It's not the on-field stuff for me. It's kind of, or at least the game heroics, the milestones, the records, the stats. It's watching him play catch and how he was almost robotic in terms of his mechanics, just an absolute creature of routine and habit and conditioning, including the way he threw the football, even in the most mundane of tasks, playing catch while warming up, in a training camp practice, the way he hurried from drill to drill during training camp, the way he bounced on his feet all the time, his precision as a passer, the fist pump in the air when he came out from the locker room and ran to the corner to Jay-Z's public service announcement as his intro song at Gillette Stadium. But then beyond that, it's Tom being just a nice guy, as big a celebrity as he had become. And I started calling his games midway through his Patriots career. And he was still the kind of guy that if he passed you under the stadium, he made eye contact and said hello. And that's rarer than a lot of people might imagine. I've been in a lot of minor league baseball locker rooms where people just look right through you. And here's one of the greatest sports stars and the most famous people in the world who looks at, custodial staff or people in stadium operations and shows a sincere interest in them in that moment, and says hello, makes eye contact. And even people that I know that, didn't necessarily like Tom at times would say, well, he's raised right. And I think that's the great compliment that I would give to him today. So those are the things that stand with me.
Justin, you got anything for Bob?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, I got to say, Bob, you referenced sports cliches a little earlier when talking about the Super Bowl. Around here, we call them Shira-isms, because every week when we're picking our games, Chris loves to bring out the old, it's a team traveling on a short week, don't bet on them. Those kind of things that you hear, for years and years talking about football that, let's be honest, I think are a little overstated. But Chris had the best record in our picks this year, so I just had to throw that out there. I'm just curious, and maybe this is more of a comment, but I think with Brady, what's interesting to me is, for so long with the Patriots, everything just seems so like business-like. I don't think people really saw Tom Brady's personality. Myself included, we just viewed the Patriots as the evil empire and they're the enemy and so disliked by pretty much every other fan base, obviously because of the success. And, Belichick is so stern and all that. And I think I gained a new level of respect for Brady the last couple years, seeing him in Tampa, obviously continuing his great play, but just seeing a more lighter side to him and seeing a more personality and outspoken, but in a good way, which is in contrast to the quarterback who I pull for, who's outspoken in a bad way sometimes. But yeah, what was it like for you to watch Brady maybe in the public eye show a different side of his personality these last couple?
Well, first of all, Robert, I've got to say, I think Chris probably won because he bet on the Dolphins, no doubt, every week.
Yeah.
And the Patriots, of course, continue to struggle against Miami. So no doubt the Dolphins sweep over the Patriots had to put Chris on top in the end. And regarding the quarterbacks, it was fascinating to me to see the transformation in some ways of the two of them. I think I said to somebody that in a lot of ways, Aaron Rodgers proved to be the quarterback that a lot of people thought Tom Brady was, a couple of years ago in terms of, some of the statements that Rodgers made of late. But when I, not to get off track, but I think in terms of Brady and seeing his personality come out, he started to show that a little bit late in his career with the Patriots with some of the social media postings, the TB Times, which was an animated newspaper cover that would come out on the social media platforms after Patriots games, and some of the videos that were produced. And then, of course, there was the Tom versus Time Facebook docuseries. But there's no doubt about it, when he went to Tampa Bay, being in a different environment, away from the Patriots, who, although I think they've become more relaxed the last couple of years as Belichick has tried to adapt more, I think, to meet where so many of the young players are in the league, and where social media has taken branding for players and individuals in recent years. I think that Brady did have the opportunity to flourish, and he took advantage of it. He's a guy that I think, the other thing that stands out with regards to his time in New England behind the scenes is that, all of his teammates, it could have been a practice squad guy who was here for a week, or it could have been a star from another team who came in, like a Randy Moss, for example, or, guys who've been around the organization for many years. Devin McCourty, Matthew Slater, currently with the Pats. And they'd all say the same thing about Tom, that, he was a great teammate. And young guys will tell you he was the first guy to come over and extend his hand and welcome them to the team and introduce himself as if you didn't know who he was. And so I think that, with Tampa Bay, a lot of people down in that area got a chance to see him, show the human side of him that he often concealed to the Patriots. I mean, he's a master even in interviews that, sometimes reveal news, like the other night with Jim Gray. He's master often of saying a lot and saying nothing at the same time, while with a smile. But I think down in Tampa, he started to say things with a little more substance in terms of, his feelings with the NFLPA and the direction of the game and the league and rules and so forth. And so when it came to the serious side of football, I think he was a little more outspoken, but I also think he showed a funnier side as well that, teammates always recognized was there. One of the stories about Brady that's famous with teammates has another upstate New York tie to it, and to Rochester on the Dinosaur Barbecue. Because years ago, the Patriots played a game in Buffalo, and there was a snowstorm, and the team was snowed in, but they had to vacate the hotel in Buffalo, and they couldn't get enough hotel rooms to stay in Buffalo. So they went to Rochester, and the whole team basically went out to Dinosaur Barbecue and had an eat fest and a drink fest. And they wound up having a beer chugging competition, and Brady, blew everybody away in that beer chugging competition, supposedly at the Dinosaur Barbecue in Rochester. So, that's who he was from day one, a practical joker, a ball buster. And you didn't see that publicly. I think a lot of it was the celebrity too, and all the commercials and so forth, Tom at the Met Gala and, being pictured with Giselle at events like that, but also, with the Patriots, he was very tight-lipped, as most Patriots are.
Have you had a chance to watch Man in the Arena?
I've watched a few of the episodes. I've watched a few of the episodes. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really well done. I hear from a lot of Patriots fans that they really enjoyed it. I think there's a little bit of revisionism in terms of the relationship at the end with the Patriots. Try to speak objectively to it, but I think in the end, it's well produced. I think obviously it's told from his point of view today, and the point of view that he wants out there today as a retrospective. But there's some fascinating parts of it. Without getting into too much detail, I wrote about this in my retrospective the other night. After the 2014 game in Kansas City, it was several hours after the game, and I was not alone, but I happened to stumble on Tom Brady and Vince Wilfork sitting with, this look on their faces. And at the time, I didn't know whether it was resignation or resolve. And it turned out to be resolve as they came back the next week and was on to Cincinnati, and they eventually won the Super Bowl. And years later, Vince Wilfork is the Patriots teammate who, along with Richard Sherman of the Seahawks, kind of tells the story of the 2014 Patriots. And I started to think back to that night when the Pats were walloped on Monday Night Football against the Chiefs in Kansas City. And then, of course, fast forward all these years and see Vince in this documentary and start to piece it together. Okay, now I know what they were saying that night after the game, and when they got beat and Brady got pulled and people were wondering if the window had closed.
Yeah.
I have one more question. I don't want to hog too much airtime, but one more question. So we've had this debate a few times over the years on this show about what the best Super Bowl was. I have said I think Super Bowl 49, Patriots Seahawks, is just the flat out best game. It had the best narratives, one of the most famous plays in Super Bowl history. I think Robert said 51 with Patriots Falcons with the 28-3 and all that. He said that is the best Super Bowl in his opinion. Robert, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right, yeah.
Bob, what is your opinion? What is the best? Not even necessarily Patriots related. What's the best Super Bowl ever?
Well, to me, it's 49. Robert, 51 is close behind. But I think 49, I think a number, I was listening to an interview with one of the stars of that game, Shane Vereen, earlier today, and he pointed out a reminder that it was the number one offense against the number one defense. The Seahawks were the defending champs. It was a game of big plays for both sides. It went back and forth until the Seahawks took a 2-score lead. They made it 10 points in the second half, and the Patriots came back and won it. But it also had two unsung heroes, because Butler, everybody remembers at the end with that interception coming out of nowhere, figuratively. But Chris Matthews was the guy who also came out of nowhere for Seattle. I think he had 6 catches over 100 yards, caught a touchdown pass late in the first half. And he was the reason Malcolm Butler was even in the game, because the Patriots initially had Kyle Arrington on Matthews, and he couldn't cover him. And then they put Logan Ryan on Matthews, and he couldn't cover him. And so then they wound up turning to Butler, and he finally got the job done. They moved some people around, and it was Butler, of course, who made the play at the end. But I just think the two coaches, I think the star power in that game, I think, both teams played that game at a real high level. There were a couple of interceptions thrown by Brady in the game, one early in the red zone. And I think other than that, there really were not a lot of mistakes in that game, if any at all, really by either team. So I think in terms of being a well-played back and forth game between, one team that was trying to be a dynasty, seemingly on the verge, and another team that was, many thought its dynasty had passed, and they were really just trying to start the second iteration of it.
Yeah. Robert, do you got anything else for Bob?
No, I to the point about the Super Bowl, I think, Bob raises a great point about that game, which is, that whole idea of dynasty, because certainly the Patriots had their time in the aughts, if you will. And then, they really hadn't, they had those games against the Giants. And so, everybody was kind of looking past them. And then, you have this resurgence where they get back to the Super Bowl against a team that, had just won the Super Bowl the year before. And many thought, with how their defense was built and with Russell Wilson, that, that was the new dynasty. And, they pull it out, and we know what happened after that. The Patriots kept going back. They went on another run and won some more. So, though 49 was a great game. But, that comeback, as a Bills fan, comebacks are, we do have a memorable comeback, but we also have some comebacks that have ended in tragic fashion. So, to see a team, in the biggest moment come back from that kind of deficit, of course, it helps to have Kyle Shanahan calling the plays and choking his way to another loss. But I agree. Those are certainly the top two games for sure. The order, we'll disagree.
Bob, is there anything that you want to discuss with us, or something you want to talk about yourself, or you want to plug? I know you talked about your blog earlier. I actually did read the entry this morning, so I wanted to be prepared going in. But is there anything that you wanted to discuss or plug before we finish up?
Chris, not really, other than to say, if anybody wants to donate to a cause, I'm running the Boston Marathon. I'm going to try to for the Doug Flutie Jr. Foundation for Autism. Of course, Flutie with the Bills sold Flutie Flakes with the proceeds going to his foundation, which he started in honor of his son, Dougie Jr., diagnosed with autism, to provide a lot of great services for individuals and their families on the autism spectrum. So I've got get that going on. I'm obviously in the middle of the off season now for us, trying to recover from those two Bills games, try to reevaluate where the Patriots are going forward after getting slammed in week 16 and then really humiliated in the wild card round by Josh Allen and company. Quite a role reversal there for the Bills and the Patriots. So I wish you guys all the best. Hopefully we have a great game on Sunday. I think it should be. And then we'll see what happens. See what happens with Aaron Rodgers. We'll see what happens with Tom Brady. We'll see what happens, with the Bills now that Brian Daboll's with the Giants. And of course, I've got a vested interest in what happens with the Patriots.
Yeah, Bob, we appreciate you joining us as always. And I'm sure we'll have you on before the draft or after the draft, but we'll do an off-season show with you. Again, we appreciate your time. It's always good to see you. And if you're ever back in Auburn and, the bars are open, you want to get a beer, please let me know.
Would love to do it. Prison City for sure.
Yep. Take care, Bob. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. And with that, we'll sign off. Everybody who joined us today or is joining us in the future, watching this after, we say thank you. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Please do not drink and drive, and we will see you next week.